think, where do I want my brand to expand to in 10 years from now? Because you really want to brand who you're going to be and what you're going to be, as opposed to branding what and who you are right now. Because, even in this next hour, you're going to be a different person to the person you are sat here right now, right? So every day you're a different person, you're a different level of yourself. And as you continue to grow and expand, I want you to step out of yourself and imagine, well, if I keep growing at this rate, if I continue to develop myself, if I continue to develop this brand, if I continue to develop the kind of people that I'm working with, and I continue to develop the products and the programs and the way that I'm supporting people, when I have done that in 10 years from now, what does my life and business look like then? And can I see myself working with a different level of client in 10 years from now than the one that I'm working with today? Because you might, and this happens quite a lot as well. So again, it's very normal, very natural. You might, work with people who can only afford a certain amount right now because that's how you value yourself. However, in 10 years from now, when you've really built a substantial amount of trust in your brand and your business, and you've built an incredible amount of credibility and visibility, and you've got videos up there and you've got all this exposure to what you're doing, then the more value you apply to that, the more value people are going to apply to you. And so there will naturally be a process where you start to attract bigger and bigger clients and bigger associates and bigger ambassadors. When I think back to when I was building my design agency initially back in 2002, I was working with small business owners just like me. And then one of those small business owners referred me to someone and said, you need to go work with these people. I've told them about you. I've made an introduction, go see them. So now I've gone from working with a small business owner, a startup business owner, to an established business that was turning over, I think it was something like 2.5 million a year. By the time I walked away from that business and said, I'm not enjoying this anymore, because I'd stopped working with the small business owners. They couldn't afford us by that point. After 8 years of us growing the business, they couldn't afford to work with us because we were working then with massive blue chip organizations and corporations. We were going in and making the marketing director look good then. And I wasn't seeing the whites of the eyes of the company owner, which was not meeting my personal purpose. So, and they're turning over millions and millions and millions. So you see, just in like a 7 or 8 year period, the amount of growth from the person that I started working with to the person that I ended working with. And why I really want you to detach yourself from your business as you go through this process is to look at it objectively, as if you're the own coach for your own business, is to look objectively at that and say, in 10 years from now, do I still want to be working with the same person? And if I did get inquiries that came to work with other bigger, opportunities, am I going to say yes to them? Because if you step into the future and if I'd have stepped into the future back then and said, oh my God, we're going to work with all these blue chip corporates, and then realized what that would do to diminish my creativity, I would have said no. In hindsight, I would have gone back and said no. I would have stuck true to who I am, and who knows, I might still be running that design agency to this day because I would have continued enjoying who I was working with. Ultimately, the biggest reason why I wasn't enjoying what I was doing anymore and why that business was really squashing me was because of the expectations I placed on myself and the business. Got higher because there were higher stakes, there was more to lose. And so I was overcompensating, trying to make sure that everything was perfect. But as well, I wasn't enjoying the people that I was working with. And that was really squashing my soul. So it's a good opportunity for you right now, as you go through that branding process, is to just check in with yourself and say, you know, because for me, actually, small business owners is who I love working with. That's my passion. I love seeing the amount of change that can happen very quickly from the seedling of an idea to a fully running business that has been birthed and is out there making waves and creating ripples in people's lives. I won't ever get to see that working with a corporate, because you just don't get that transaction, that trust currency transaction. I think, am I thinking big enough? am I thinking big enough? Am I thinking in terms of how it's going to be instead of how it is? Am I applying a mindset to it that is questioning and challenging in a really healthy way? Not oh no, that could never be me, but no, that's not what I want to do. Right? And it's very healthy to be able to say no to things, is to know as much what you don't want as what you do want. So think about, in 10 years from now, what don't I want, and be very clear about that. I knew very clearly when I built How to Build a Brand, because of what I'd been through. I knew very, very clearly who I didn't want to work with, the hours that I wanted to work, because I didn't want to burn out again. I was very clear about my boundaries of what I didn't want. And most people do tend to start with what they don't want first. And then in contrast, what's the opposite of that? What I do want, because I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want to be working lots of hours. I didn't want to be stuck in one location like I was when I had my offices. I didn't want a team. I was really clear about that. Like, I didn't want an in-house team. I was done with all that. I didn't want the responsibility of all that. A virtual team. So I don't want an in-house team, but I want to grow. What's the answer? What's the opposite? A virtual team. Tick. Right. I know that I don't want to be stuck in an office. What's the answer? To build something where I can be anywhere at any time. Okay. I knew that I didn't want to just be exchanging my time for money. I didn't want to be doing that. Okay. So what's the opposite of that? What's the answer? Exchange my knowledge for money. Okay. So all of those answers then led to me building a global resource, because that way I could create the resources whenever I wanted to, at any time of day. I could show up wherever I was, so I could then travel. I could be anywhere in the world and have a coaching session or deliver something. That was like the only thing that was tethering me, was a time that I had to be somewhere. But then again, it was like, okay, so I don't want to be stuck working on everybody else's thing all the time, because I, again, in the agency, because I was so focused on everyone else's business, my business was going back and back and back in priority, because I was making everybody else first. And every client that I was taking on was cash flow, but it was also a cost of opportunity to my life. Because every client I took on, yes, it looked great on the turnover, looked great on the bottom line, profit was amazing, but what was the sacrifice for that? Me not seeing my family, not having time for a relationship, not even have time to walk my dog. So, think about the cost of opportunity as well. And, what is it going to cost you to build the idea that you had? What will you get from it? And what will it cost you to create that? And if there's a part of you that thinks, okay, actually, that's going to be, the cost is too high. The cost is too high. I'm not prepared to give as much of my life for that. Well, what's the opposite of that? What can you do? What could you do? Right? And so having gone through that process, and also having gone through COVID and lockdown and everything for the last few years, I'm very clear that I don't want to be traveling all over the world running events again. What can I do? Run some retreats. I'll enjoy that just as much. But this time I will build time in for myself, which I never did. I'd run a retreat Thursday to Tuesday, and people would show up on the Thursday and we'd leave on the Tuesday. And then I was back into business. I was probably traveling off to go speak somewhere. And now it's like, no, I'm very clear on those boundaries. If I run a retreat, it'll be Thursday to Sunday, and then I'll have 2 days for me. So what can I do in that time? So, it's just set some really graceful boundaries. It's not, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. It's not, I suppose it is in a way. It's like really laying down the line, but it's not being so fixed on something that you've got nowhere to go and no creativity in the business. What we're doing is just saying, well, what I know that I definitely don't want is to be working before 12 midday, right? I don't want to be working. I consider work as work that I get paid for. When I'm working, I'm getting paid for that. Anything that I'm doing on my own business, I see that as my creative fun. That's my creative flow. That's my tomorrow's money. So I don't necessarily count that as working hours because I'm enjoying myself as I'm doing it. So effectively, like I work from 7 till 8 every morning doing this mastermind, and then I don't work again until at 3 p.m. in the afternoon when I'm here doing this mastermind. And anything that I do, I might go for a snooze. I go and spend an hour up the field with the dogs, did some yoga this morning, the sun was out. But while I was doing my yoga, I had a TED talk on. So I'm still, I'm thinking, so it's just about balancing what you're doing in a really healthy way so that you build a healthy business that gives you what you want, that gives others what they need, and that there's a financial reward and return in exchange for that. So separate yourself from the business if you can, and really see this as something, be your own coach as you go through the 7-step Kickstarter, and make sure that every step you go through is done from a place of distancing. Okay, so I'm working on somebody else's business right now, because if you get too emotionally attached to it, then you'll get attached to the outcome as well. And that's usually where you start to get stuck, because then you start to go into, but who am I to do this? And you start asking all those questions. So see it as if you're going through this process for your best friend. And this best friend is someone you've known all your life, and you know how good they are, and they'll always deliver on their promise. What they've created is amazing. And all you're doing is helping them to sell it. So create some distance from yourself, and you'll actually find it easier to go through that process, I think.